During her time at the IRC, she got to know the clients very well and discovered everyone has a story.
Everybody comes in there with a story, and there are stories of triumph, there are stories of failure. There are any plot that has ever been written about anywhere in the world's literature, you see acted out every day at the IRC. People who are both the best and the worst, people who have done terrible things and then redeem themselves, people who are still trying to shake the past. Trying to think, we had, oh gosh, some of them are kind of sad stories. Some of them are stories that I don't even yet know what the end will be, but I've seen, there was one man who came in, and because of his legal situation, it was almost impossible to get housed and get helped. And it turned out that he it was a case of identity theft, and everybody had been trying to help him with a name that wasn't his own. And through research, we were able to actually find the man in Georgia who was the real man, and he came up from Georgia with a stack of papers. He had been trying since 1999 to get his name restored, and we were able to help him do that. Now that was way beyond what the IRC usually does, but it was just remarkable. And the other man still claims that that's his name, which made it very difficult to help him because he couldn't get. There were a lot of government services he couldn't get if he was not, if he was under a false identity. And that was something that just was kind of a roller coaster ride of trying to figure out who he was, and the whole question of identity, whether it's formal or informal, people becoming who they were meant to be, who they started out to be as children, and often through really severe damage and abandonment and hurt, became somebody else, and then them working their way back to being somebody who can go above and beyond, who connects. I had one man come to me. We had somebody come in during on a really snowy day, and they had no place to go, and other people who were homeless just kind of surrounded them with help. Somebody found an extra sleeping bag. Somebody told them about where to get services, and one man was particularly helpful. And he came to me later and he said, I never knew what it meant to help somebody. And it turned out that he had only been out of prison. He'd been in prison for something like 15 years. He'd only been out of prison for about 6 weeks. And here he was for the first time in his life giving up things that he needed in order to help somebody else. And he's a tough guy with a tough past, just sitting there with tears running down his cheeks, telling me, I never knew what it felt like before to do this for someone. And that to me, that was the essence of what we were there for, that people were helping themselves by helping other people, and the IRC was a platform for that, is a platform for that.
Before she took over the IRC, Liz was a writer. Now retired from the nonprofit, she has time to write and reflect.
Well, I like most writers, I was always a reader, and then I went after that as a profession when I had children, because I wanted to have something that would be flexible and will allow me to kind of work around their schedule, and became because of where we are, with the furniture industry so close in High Point, I got involved with the furniture industry and the furniture market and started writing for high-end decorating magazines. So actually most of my career was writing about million-dollar homes, high-end furniture, fancy resorts. I did a lot of travel writing. So there must be something in my horoscope that leads me back to home, whether it's home or homelessness. So I used to write for, every time I went to the grocery store, I would pass the magazine rack there at the checkout counter, and almost every time I would pass a magazine that had something by me in it, because that was sort of my beat. And I used to cover the furniture market for the New York Times. I wrote for the New York Times quite a bit, and as I said, for a lot of glossy magazines, a lot of airline magazines. It was a great way to not only have a career that was flexible, but also have a career where I could get interested in something and then find out as much as I wanted to about it and get paid for it.
In an earlier issue of Triad City Beat, Liz wrote an article called The Tao of Panhandling.
Panhandling is certainly an issue, becomes a municipal issue in a lot of communities, and around the country there is a real trend towards criminalizing panhandling, and which is another way of criminalizing homelessness. It's kind of the opens the door for a lot of other criminalization. And in Greensboro, there have been some discussions about making panhandling, limiting further where people can panhandle and who can do it and that kind of thing. Right now, to panhandle legally, you need to have a panhandling license, and there are some limitations on where, and most of those are safety limitations. And I think, in fact, the regulations in Greensboro are pretty sensible. I actually sat in with a discussion of people, with somebody from the police department, people who are homeless, and for the most part they said, yeah, no, that makes sense. People shouldn't be in a place where they could get hit by cars or where they could cause traffic accidents, that kind of thing. But it was coming up again, and I realized that a lot of people who are complaining about panhandlers or who are making decisions on behalf of panhandlers or about panhandling don't really know who they are. And one of the things that I had learned from people who do that is that it's a dynamic process, that the act of panhandling changes the panhandler too. It's the person standing there is not just a cardboard cutout. That person is somebody with an active life who has reached a point in his or her life where panhandling looks like the best option. And the experience of standing there in the hot sun with cars whizzing past and people yelling things out the windows is not an easy one. People say, well, why don't they just get a job? Well, there are a million reasons that people can't get jobs, and standing there with a sign, many people look on as a job. It's certainly hard work. And so I thought, well, I have some access that other people might not, to hear those stories. So I knew some of the people who came to the IRC who did that, and so I just asked them to come into my office, and one by one I said, tell me what it feels like. Tell me what it felt like to make that decision. What was it like on the first day? What are some of your best experiences, some of your worst experiences? How has it changed you? And so that's what I wrote about. I think I don't think that's certainly not every car that goes by. That's not what's happening, but all of us know it. It doesn't take much to hurt our feelings, and to be standing there and have already hit the worst point in your life and then have somebody yell something out the window. And I think some of the experiences that people recounted to me that seemed to hurt the most were when someone gave money but gave it in such a grudging or insulting way that it took away from the gift. One man told me a story about a woman who stopped and gave him $10, which is a lot for somebody who Usually it's just $1 or $2. And he thanked her very much, but as he was walking away, she said, "Now, but you have to promise me you're not going to spend it on drugs and alcohol." And he turned around and he said, "You don't know me, but you just made a judgment about me." And he gave her the $10 back. And she said, "What? Take." And he said, "No, not from you, not today." And I thought that was a very generous way for him to do it, because he was leaving the door open for her to change. And she said, "Do you mean that if the next car came by and somebody gave you $1, you'd take it, but you're not going to take my $10? And he said, "Not from you, not today." And he said, I have lost everything, but I haven't lost my dignity." And I thought those were important stories for people.
In this day in society, the cost of living is rising, and wages have hardly moved.
There's no sexy, great solution out there that nobody's ever thought of. There's not enough affordable housing in Greensboro. With the closing of Heritage House, with all of its limitations, Heritage House did have the advantage that it was one check, that utilities were included. And a lot of the people who are looking at housing are on very limited incomes, and sometimes fixed incomes if they're receiving a disability check or Social Security. So one utility bill that's out of line with their budget can just start the whole spiral. So there needs to be affordable housing that is not only affordable in the rent, but affordable in utilities and on a bus line, so that transportation is not an issue. And we just don't have enough of that, and we're losing it much too fast with Heritage House closing. Even things like UNCG moving into the Glenwood area. We lost some affordable housing stock when those houses went down, and I don't see it being replaced fast enough. So affordable housing, obviously more jobs, and that's something that the city has struggled with for a long time. A lot of the people that we see at the IRC used to work in textile factories, and those are gone. And not just in Greensboro, but in the counties around us, particularly Rockingham County, there's a lot of poverty there. They've lost a lot of jobs because of the textile industry, and people who can't find work in Eden or Reedsville will start coming south to Greensboro. The mental health system has just been dismantled. It's just not what it should be. People aren't getting the help that they can, and the same with the fact that Medicaid was not extended in North Carolina means that there's a whole group of people who are homeless or working poor who don't have medical coverage. That means that they still go to the emergency room. There's still that safety net, but it's a safety net that's very expensive for the larger community and doesn't do much for people with chronic illnesses and chronic health problems. So some of it is just we need to weave the safety net a little tighter. We need to have more there, and then I think we just need to continue to care for each other. There is a lot of caring in Greensboro. As a lot of people who are homeless say, if you go hungry in downtown Greensboro, you're just not trying hard enough, because there's so many groups that serve meals. That family hunger is a huge issue in Greensboro, but if you're on the streets, there are places you can go to get a meal. And a lot of the people who are serving those meals are developing relationships with people who are homeless.
Will raising the minimum wage make a difference?
That would make a huge difference. I mean, $7.25 an hour, even $8 an hour, even $10 an hour. With rents what they are in Greensboro, utility bills, you just can't make it. And therefore, people work and work and work and take the bus long distances to where the jobs are, and they still can't make it. It's still all that has to happen is that you miss a couple of days of work. Your hours get cut. If you have a car, your car breaks down. and you're right off the edge.